Good afternoon. It's another edition of another week of your popular current affairs program, 60 Minutes Nigeria. My name is Ego Sagmula. I welcome you to this week's edition of the program. I can assure you that today's program will be very, very incisive. Today's program will bring you knowledge. Today's program will be educative as well as entertaining. I have very distinguished personalities with me today who will be dissecting the national issues for our discussion. We'll be looking at federal government's fight against corruption. Now, what necessitated this is the recent judgment. 4 years after Olisame II was sentenced to 7 years in prison for corruption, for money laundering, and illicit cash transactions. Now, don't forget, the issue of a former governor of Abia State, Orji Kalu, came to the fore when he was also sentenced to prison after years of litigation. We want to assess federal government's fight against corruption. Also on today's program, the Supreme Court has ruled, and that happened yesterday, in terms of the Bayelsa governorship election judgment, which of course the APC, the ruling party, appealed the judgment of the Supreme Court, asked the Supreme Court to review its judgment. A lot transpired in that. What are the lessons? We'll be looking at that. I have with me an eminent and of course a legal luminary in Edo State, Barrister Edugo Eboigbe. Nice to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, she'll be giving us all the legal facets as regard our discussion. And of course, I have with me a an eminent personality as well, and of course a seasoned social commentator and analyst, Edi Efionayi, popularly known as Pathfinder. Nice to have you on our program
nice to
today.
Have you.
Okay, so the stage is set. Our first topic for discussion: the federal government's fight against corruption. We'll be taking an incisive and in-depth look into that. We'll start with Edi Efionayi, aka Pathfinder. How will you assess the fight against corruption by this government?
Well, sir, thank you very much. The fight against corruption by this present government has been quite encouraging, depending on the angle you look at it. In the history of this country, there has been successive governments have always been fighting corruption. There has been no government, right from Montreal Mohammed days, that have not fought the issue of corruption.
Okay.
Recently, we heard of Olisame II, former
spokesman of the opposition party now,
was sentenced to 7 years.
Yes.
7 years in prison. Orji Kalu was also sentenced. It's the right thing in the right direction. But my take on the issue of corruption is that government fight against corruption has been very cosmetics.
Mm-hmm. How do you mean?
Now, we just hear of one or two celebrated cases of successes here and there. But Orji Kalu was sentenced for corrupt practices. But what led to the issue of Orji Kalu being sentenced? I've always argued. I argued in this forum some time ago. There's what I call chain link issue of fighting corruption. Now, as a governor of a state, Orji Kalu, for example, does not have access to the state treasury.
Okay.
He's not a signatory, as a governor, he's not a signatory to any government treasury. People are involved in those affairs of government. You have the Commissioner for Finance, you have the Permanent Secretary, Government House, and all that. Now, for somebody to be convicted for corrupt practices, what led to it? Who aided his being corrupt? Now, for example, if you say a minister is corrupt, the minister, for example, is not the head of a ministry in terms of finance. The permanent secretary is the accounting officer. For the for this minister to be corrupt, somebody aided him. Now, it's only Ojukalu that was sentenced. Where are the permanent secretaries, where are the commissioners, and where are all others in the chain link that led to Ojukalu being sentenced? Okay. So we only hear of Kalu. Now, until government comes up with a pragmatic approach to fighting corruption, we are not going anywhere.
Yeah, but I will allow you to continue, but let me quickly ask this. Now, the governor is the head of the executive. Yes. He's the head of whatever happens. So it takes responsibility.
Now, if the governor is taking responsibility,
yes,
people aided him. Now, let me give you an instance. We heard some time ago when the former governor, Adams Oshomole, was governor of Edo State, that Welu Road, for example, appears in government house to have been tied with drains, which means that people signed documents to show that the Welu Road was tied. And there is no evidence on ground to show that such thing was even done in the first place. Which, if it shows that it was tied, it means that money appropriated for such a road was diverted by those in government, who aided them to divert that money. If you are holding the governor responsible, for example, people aided the governor to do what he did. Until you continue with a system where you punish those who aided the governor to do what the governor did, the fight against corruption is a mirage. It can never succeed.
Okay, your own approach is bringing another dimension to the discussion, and I think that the viewer will also have their own opinion on the issue. Mr. Ediefena Eke Pathfinder is looking at the chain, the other persons who ought to be brought to book as regard corrupt practices. That's the point he's canvassing on the program. But I think that those who do the investigation should also look into that. But the issue of Welu Road, we don't have documents about that. That's his own personal opinion. But let's also get the thoughts of Barrister Idogogo as regard the fight of the federal government against corruption, and looking at the recent cases, Lisa Metu being sent to prison for 7 years, Ojukalu, and some other governors. Yes.
Well, one of the elemental aims of this present administration is to actively and effectively fight corruption and corrupt practices in Nigeria. And it is a well-known saying that if a country fails to kill corruption, corruption may eventually destroy that country.
Yes.
Be that as it may, the government has loudly said it loud and clear that it aims to fight and combat corruption. But my issue is the approach. Yes, he has made it evidently clear that this is what he wants to do, this is what he plans to do, but how is he going about it? Because if you look at Nigeria today, holistically, we have not done much in effectively tackling corruption. In all facets of the system, you have issues of corruption from the top to the bottom, and the issues of corruption is seriously bedeviling the economic development and democratic development of the country. So, although it's laudable, it's beautiful to see beautiful judgments of court whereby corrupt officials are being punished. But I want to say that these are just pockets. Just pockets. It's like making a mountain out of a molehill. It's like tiny drops of water in a river, which will have very little impact in the fight, in the effective fight against corruption. And don't forget, if you don't fight corruption, it's going to virtually impact all other aspects of Nigeria. It's going to impact poverty, economic development, and all of that. So my view is that it's not just enough to pick a few. Just as my colleague said, it's a line, it's a chain. From the top to the bottom, there are people directly responsible. The governor may not have direct access to these funds. The individuals they are saying are being corrupt, they ordinarily, they are not supposed to have direct access to these funds. So what are we saying? This is an institutional matter. The fight against corruption is a structural matter. Unless we put effective structures on ground to combat corruption, the fight against corruption is going to largely be a mirage. It's going to be an irony. We cannot achieve it except we put structures on ground. all other countries of the world that Nigerians and other people are laboring night and day to migrate to. They have all these issues, but they are able to fight corruption. They are able to sustain their fight against corruption because the structures are on ground. What we lack in this country is the effective structures to fight and combat corruption, because the average human being is naturally greedy. If he sees access to have money and he knows he will not be caught, he will definitely take the money. So if you don't put structures on ground to prevent him from having access, from taking the money, put structures on the ground so that once you take the money, you're going to be caught. Once you fail to do your lawfully employed duty, you're going to be charged. Because when you say this corruption, it's not just about dealing with public officials. In your own little office, what do? You that is selling rice, do you use the back of your cup to measure rice? You that is in a public office, do you sleep on duty? All these are corruptions. And our system are so engrossed in that we just fail to acknowledge that these are instances of corruption. So I said the institution goes back and restructures itself so that we learn to do things right, and then we learn to effectively punish those that fail to do things right. Because now if you look at it, you have caught this man, all those that abetted him along the line, all those that aided in releasing these funds, what did we do to them? We did not even bring them out. We did not prosecute them. In all institutions, when you go to a public office, the person is eating instead of doing it. I tell you say, take your time, sit down there, and nothing is done. So except you put structures on ground to see that people learn to do the right thing. People learn that they cannot be corrupt and go with it. People find it difficult. In fact, that is what they find it difficult to access these funds, because as far as they're able to access these funds, with the way things are difficult in Nigeria, they will prefer to even take the money and run away. So except government goes back to the drawing board and put structures on ground whereby people cannot access public funds easily, whereby there's enough accountability, then the fight against corruption is likely going to be an illusion. Okay,
we are going to come back to you, because we have the issue of Olisametu, who was just recently sent to prison. But we have our third guest with us, Ipamusa Osamede. You'll be joining us, but that will be immediately after this break.
My name is Fatima Yusuf, a polio vaccinator working in Lagos. The challenge we face is mainly misunderstanding. Some say because the children receive routine immunization at health center, they don't need the one we give at home. Some won't go to the health center to receive routine immunization because they receive the polio vaccine at home. But both are important. Look at the dirty environment, bad sewage disposal, people defecating openly, contaminated water. Everything needed to spread polio is all around all of us. Polio can lead to paralysis and even death. You can't even say prevention is better than cure. Because for polio, there is no cure, only prevention.
I'm here to tell you that polio is like the rain that doesn't befriend anybody. The only cover against polio is for every child under the age of 5 to receive the polio vaccine. Your child is at risk because polio no dey look face. Polio doesn't discriminate.
Protect your child. Get them immunized in the hospital and at home.
It's a delight to be back, and I hope you are enjoying the program 60 Minutes Nigeria, a current affairs program where we dissect national issues. We are looking at the federal government's fight against corruption, because it is believed that corruption is actually the underpinning for underdevelopment. And so we need to look at what the federal government has done, as the federal government has achieved success, and my guests are already making their very, very vital contribution to the program. But just joining us is the essay to Edo State Governor on digital media, Ipamusa Osamede. Nice to have you on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, we'll just go straight to you and get your comment. Now, what's your assessment of the federal government's fight against corruption?
Well, for me, I believe the fight against corruption has been is laudable.
Okay.
You know, when the president came on board in 2015, he hinged his campaign promises on the tripod: security, economy, and fight against corruption.
Because the president is seen as a man of integrity?
Yes.
Okay.
But for me, I think he has actually done more as regards the fight against corruption, and not so much in the first two.
Okay.
You see, when he came on board, he gave a marching order to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, and as well as other sister agencies, the ICPC, to spare no one. And that was why you see that even those people who crossed in from
defected to the APC.
Yes, they still had their own
Cases in court.
Cases in court.
Ojikalu.
Yes, Ojikalu.
Former governor of Abia State.
Yes, that was recently sentenced, was a prime example of that. Is resolved.
Okay.
So we also brought about the Arbitration of Criminal Justice Act of 2015. So I think he has actually done a lot in terms of checking corruption, but we still have, because government itself is a three-tiered system. You have the executive, the judiciary, and the
legislature.
Yes, but then it's the executive can't do all. You still have the judiciary, and we've seen situations where cases are deliberately being stored by and protracted for virtually no reason at all. The case that my colleagues have been discussing ever since, that of Olisametu, has been on ground for the past 4 years. Yes, 4 years and counting. So the excuses that the machinery that these lawyers use is finding ways to keep on protracting the case, till probably a government comes on board that will say, oh, if you are for me, then your case would be dropped, or then they could even run for election where they now get immunity. That is why you see most of them, even in those states who have corruption cases hanging on their neck, are now looking for ways to become governor. Even the Ojikalu that you made mention of wanted to go into the Senate, I think was already a senator when the sledgehammer actually fell on his own person. So you see that they are always trying to find ways to escape all of these corruption fights. The judiciary is finding ways to keep on protracting. That's lawyers representing them now finding ways to protract cases. And then you find the legislature recently now making calls for immunity, saying, oh, they themselves want immunity. So you see, the corruption fight cannot just be won by the executive arm alone. The judiciary must also be ready to decongest the court processes, because you see, these politicians, it's only what really matters to them that they try to make amends as regards concerning basically. You see that if it has to do with elections, tribunal, they will tell you it's 180 days. It must not exceed 180 days, 6 months. But when it has to do with corruption, they could keep on protracting it for years.
But don't you think because of the fact that nobody can be said to be guilty or to have committed a crime except proven to be guilty?
Yes.
So these lawyers, they do their jobs to actually prove the case beyond
they keep on stalling
all doubts.
Yes.
Don't you think so?
Olisametu, for example, even when in 2017 there was this drama about his health. When he came to the court,
yeah,
he came on a stretcher.
Okay.
The first time he came, he actually fell. He slumped.
Yes.
I don't know if that was drama.
Okay.
But you find out that these people, whenever it comes to corruption cases, that is when they suddenly fall sick. So if he slumped and then he was carried on a stretcher, so you find the lawyers could not even back that up. There was no medical reports whatsoever. He was only saying he wants to go outside the country for treatment. And we all know when they go outside the country, they never come back. Dizani is still out there and she's not yet back. So those are just clever ways, antics of these lawyers to find ways to keep on protracting the cases, even when there are no genuine reasons. And that is why even the court recently, especially the Supreme Court, they are now going as far as punishing lawyers, whether senior advocate of Nigeria or not. They punish them for deliberately trying to prolong a case unnecessarily. If you have your client is sick, you should come and provide medical reports. But there was none. Okay. And so you just understand that this is just their antics to keep on playing on the senses of the average.
Okay, we'll come back to you, well, sir. Mr. Jeffrey, is it true that when you fight corruption, corruption fights back? Is that what this government is facing? Because you have said that celebrated cases, there are so many other cases we understand. The FCC pride itself to have prosecuted so many corruption cases. They came on air to actually make that public statement that they've achieved prosecution of so number of cases and all that. But don't you think when you fight corruption, corruption fights back?
Obviously.
Okay.
Now, when the system itself allows people to make corruption strive. the system we find ourselves in this country make corruption strive. Now, if you look at the process of election in this country, you know, what is the salary of a governor for 4 years? And then if they tell you the campaign expenses that you will make to bring a governor to power, is huge. Now, when you say you are fighting corruption, you see, it is only when you are not in the good books of government that you really talk about corruption itself. Because if you don't fight it well, the system will automatically fight itself back. Now, these governors, or any position at all, a local government chairman, a councillor, a president, National Assembly members, they spend so much money to get themselves into power. Now, ordinarily, their salary for 4 years, we are not talking about what they are appropriated to themselves now. Their salary for 4 years cannot measure up to the huge amount of money they spend to get themselves elected into office.
Okay.
Now, by the time they get to office, election has become an investment in this country. By the time they get to office, they want to recoup back such huge expenses.
Yes.
Now, how do you recoup back? The recouping back your investment in politics come in different forms. Some may have their personal money to spend, very few. Many others are sponsored by godfathers. And that is where you continue to have these fights between this and that, those in government and those who are out of government. Because most of them, for example, are sponsored. Now, those who sponsored them to come to power, we want to recoup back their expenses. Many of them are businessmen, big-time businessmen. Many of them are kingmakers who cannot be king. A kingmaker who brought out huge amount of money to put a governor in power, for example, definitely the governor must do everything possible to recoup, to pay back his godfather. So, in most cases, you find that those who, when we are saying we are fighting corruption, the system itself allows corruption to strive.
So that means there must be a review of even the electoral process.
Yes, because
it has to do with campaigns.
The campaign expenses, for example,
yes,
to run for a local government councillor, you know the huge amount they spend. Not to talk of a local government chairman, a House of Rep member, a senator, and don't even go about the issue of a governor.
Yes.
So how do they recoup back all these expenses? It creates room for corrupt practices. And then by the time you want to fight a godfather or a kingmaker who did everything to bring you to power, and then in the long run you want to fight corruption and you want to fight one of those kingmakers, it becomes a problem. Corruption will start to fight back the system. We don't need to mention names, but there are celebrated names in this country who the system cannot fight. We know names that in this country the system cannot fight. We know people who are in government, who were in government before, who were nothing before they came to government. By the time they left government, they amassed so much weight. So many who have universities, who were nothing before they left, before they became governor. But today they have universities everywhere. 60% of private universities we have in this country are owned by government officials. Where do they amass that kind of wealth to establish a university? It's from corrupt practices. Okay. So in an attempt to fight such people, the corrupt system will continue to fight itself.
I'm going to come back to you. There's an issue I'm going to ask, but let's get the thought of Barrister Idogo. Now, this corruption, we have actually been deliberating on corruption, but there's an aspect. Why do legal practitioners, why do they deploy antics to actually try to outsmart the system? Why do they do that?
Well, that's a beautiful question, and I want to say that when you say their legal practitioners are utilizing delay tactics, judicial process is taking time. That is just from the myopic view of a layman and not from a legal mind. The law is the law is blind, the law is impartial, and the law is not a sentimental baby. The law deals with the facts before the courts. And under the eyes of the law as provided under section 36, there is the presumption of innocence until proven otherwise. And in corruption cases which falls under penal cases, the proof is beyond reasonable doubt. And proving a matter beyond reasonable doubt, it's a very Herculean case. Matter is a very Herculean task, and the proof lies on the prosecution. So in other words, before you come for a corruption matter, the prosecution must have done the needful. They must have done their homework beyond all forms of loopholes or challenges. And of course, the lawyer is an officer in the temple of justice. And one of the things you are taught as a legal practitioner, even in the Nigerian law, is that you should not turn aside a brief to defend a litigant. You should not. You are supposed to be impartial and take a matter on the merits of the case. And when you are dealing with matters on the merits of the case, you look at many things. You can look at it from the angle of technicalities. So if the other lawyer, if the prosecution lawyer fails to tidy his side on the angle of technicalities, you can actually strike aside a matter. You can look at it from very many angles. So if a prosecution lawyer fails to tidy his matter, it is not the fault of the defendant's lawyer. The defendant's lawyer is only carrying out his official duties in the temple of justice. So in the eyes of the layman, they say, we all know this man was corrupt. We all know this man took all the monies in Nigeria. But in the eyes of the law, he is presumed guilty. And except the prosecution can prove it beyond reasonable doubt. And that proof, that burden of proof lies on the prosecution. His presumption of innocence cannot be tampered with. And that's what we see in all these cases. And that's why no matter how desperate Nigerians are to get judgment, the process of the law must take its course. It must take the process of time. If he's sick, as the law says, when a defendant is sick, he should be entitled to bail. He will be given bail. He will be given time to take care of himself and all that. But in the eyes of the layman, say, the law is slow. But that is the law as it is in Nigeria, and it cannot be bent for any reason whatsoever, because the law is not what is sentimental.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. But before I let you go on that, now I want you to tell our viewer out there, government officials are watching this program, members of the public are watching this program. Do you think there is need for a review of the judicial process in this country to enhance speedy dispensation of justice, Barrister Dogo?
Definitely.
Okay.
It has long been overdue that the criminal justice system in Nigeria, in many aspects, needs to be overhauled. And to be honest, in all fairness, a lot has been done in trying to speed up the judicial process. That's why, of course, you now have what we call the front-loading system, and you now have the present administration of criminal justice Act, which is there to help in terms of administering timeous administration of justice. But there still needs to be a lot of overhauling in terms of removing some of the technicalities. Our courts of law are doing well. In many cases now, the courts can now decide not to strike out the matter based on issues of technicalities, but more still needs to be done. That is one. Then, in fact, the judiciary, they need more hands. They need more officers in the temple of justice, because at the end of the day, the judges are human beings, and they are overburdened with a lot of cases. That's why you see a matter is adjourned for 3 months, it's adjourned for 4 months, it's adjourned for the other month. And of course, the other lawyer is merely doing his work when he's applying for adjournment. And the law, as far as the lawyer comes with reasonable grounds for applying for adjournment, the judge is found to adhere to it to a reasonable extent. So we need more judges. We need a serious review of our present judicial system, so that we can have speedy administration of justice. And in achieving this, of course, we need more judges to be there to administer justice.
Thank you. Thank you. Ikwehonsa, now, what do you think is the way forward in the fight against corruption?
Well, we need a stronger resolve by the various executives. Although currently the federal governments more or less have the exclusive preserve on these anti-corruption agencies that's controlling them. So we need to see that they have this stronger resolve to prosecute those who are found who have questionable cases when they were in office, or even when they are still in office, because we understand that this recent calls for immunity for principal officers in the National Assembly is born out of the need for maybe some phony characters to escape justice, because you understand that when the last Senate, yes, there was a case of Saraki.
Yes, the former Senate president.
Yes, the former Senate president.
Yes,
when he had this long running issue with the EFCC. So we need a stronger resolve of all these officials to understand that if you have nothing to fear, there is no need for you to be clamoring for immunity.
But don't you think that the issue of Saraki that you brought some kind of ridicule to the National Assembly when a sitting Senate president was facing that kind of a deal?
You see, it is only the stage of our democracy. In other climes, United States, for example, the president can be tried, and we saw how recently, until he was acquitted by the Senate, Donald Trump had his own long standing issue with the Democrats and, of course, some Americans. So in other words, over there's little or no immunity for government officials. If you have an issue, you will be tried. But in
the president has immunity.
Only those executive officers.
Yeah.
But the other.
So if the president has immunity, the governor has immunity. Why shouldn't the Senate president also enjoy immunity?
You see,
now the president, if the president is accused of a particular crime, now the law officers will wait.
See,
after his tenure, he will be prosecuted. Yes. So why can't that be done to the principal officers of the National Assembly?
Well, I really do not see the need, because they are
yes, you are entitled to your opinion.
Yes, their duty is to make laws, and the people we borrowed our democracy, so to speak, they do not have theirs in their climb. So we all know that this is coming on the heels of these politicians trying to escape the tentacles of the law. That is the simple issue, because if you have nothing to fear, why should you be clamoring for immunity? They all know that some of them have the wherewithal to keep themselves in those offices. Like I said earlier, some of them, after going from, let's say, an office where they can be prosecuted, they will try to go to an office where they would have immunity. So, in other words, in fact, the whole idea of immunity, I do not really buy into it, because that is why you see people who have questionable characters still remaining in government. There's no reason for you to have someone who obviously has done a evil to the society that puts the person there to still keep on perpetuating himself in office. If, for example, there's a senator, there's actually no limits to their emergence. They could keep on perpetuating themselves in office there for as far as there's no need for any government official to have immunity. If you have an issue with the
law,
you should.
Thank you.
Your lawyers at least to represent you. And if the judge finds you guilty, you should be stripped of your office.
Okay, Mr. Pathfinder. Now, you have actually brought a new dimension. I said it to our discussion. There is not only the head of the executive, the governor, that should be prosecuted. There are permanent secretaries, there are directors. Now, what advice you have for government? Now, for instance, Ulisa Metu, we saw issue that from the National Security Advisor's office, funds were released without the central bank, without contract paper, all those problems. Now, what's your advice to government officials when it comes to public funds to avoid corruption?
If you do your job diligently, people give you, there's a reward for it. And then if you don't also do it well, there's also a reward for it. Until governments start to punish those who aid the issue of corruption, for example, corruption will not stop in this country. Corruption, we're only looking at corruption from one facet. We're looking at the financial aspects of corruption. There are other areas of corruption. Judicial corruption is there. Legislative corruption is there. Even administrative corruption is there. Go to a higher institution. There are a lot of corruption in the universities, colleges of education, polytechnics. There are a lot of corrupt issues. So until you reward those who do their job well and punish those who are aiding corrupt practices. You see, when you set an example of people who are not doing well and you punish them adequately, it's okay. And then also reward those who are also doing their job well.
Okay.
Now, a lot needs to be done in this country. But first, the issue of election. Let the government come up with a lot of reform. Reduce, make
campaign expensive.
Yes, campaign less expensive. Make elective offices a little bit less attractive. People kill themselves because they want to be a senator. People kill themselves before they want to become governors. We all know what a senator aims in terms of constituency projects. You know, there are, it's alleged that a senator earns as much as 500 million a year as constituency projects. They come here, they put one borehole, and then invite NTA.
We cannot authenticate that.
Yes,
yeah,
they put one borehole, invite NTA, invite ITV, invite NBS. And the cost of the television coverage is even more than the project they have even executed. So make elective offices less attractive and spend less money on election. Otherwise, this issue of corruption will continue because election in Nigeria, to me, has become a huge investment. And when you invest money on anything, you are going to get a reward. And most of these shady jobs you see people doing is because they want to cut corners to be able to get recoup back their election expenses. We all knew what happened in the airport road contracts. The airport road contract is a case in point. You know, the godfathers, let us not mention names, okay, but we know what happened in airport road.
Okay.
How it was awarded and re-awarded.
Okay.
But the government will not come out to tell you the reason why it was re-awarded. Because those they awarded the contract to, first of all, are kingmakers who cannot be king, and then who succeeded in putting one or two persons in position. And then how do you fight back such a godfather? Okay.
Thank you. Now, let's quickly move to our next topic. I hope that you are enjoying the discussion. We've actually dissected the issue of corruption. We can't finish the issue of corruption in one day, but I think some new and very, very vital aspects of the fight against corruption has been highlighted on the show. But let's look at the other issue. The Supreme Court, like I told you, roared yesterday. And that has to do with the application for review of the governorship election judgment. We understand that the party, the APC, that went to court and their candidates, cost was awarded against them. And the lawyers who made such applications also got their part of the lashes, let me use that word. They were also scolded and asked to bring the money, to pay the money. And that means the Supreme Court is trying to actually probably make a very public statement as regard what should come back and what should be the reaction to the judgment of the Supreme Court. We'll start with the lawyer. Pastor Adugowo, what happened yesterday regarding the Bayelsa governorship election judgment review by the Supreme Court?
I want to say that it was a very beautiful judgment, highly laudable, and I could not have expected anything less from the Supreme Court, which is the apex court of the land. You know, constitutionally, section 235 says clearly that on no account can an appeal be made against a decision of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court remains the highest court of the land, and if you have any grievance against a decision of the Supreme Court, ordinarily your only appeal can be to God in heaven, not to any other court in Nigeria. So it was a clear case of an abuse of court process, and it would have been made extremely nugatory the inviolability and the superiority of the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court had held any judgment contrary to the decision or the judgment it made. Ordinarily, when the Supreme Court gives a judgment, it is final, it is conclusive, and no appeal or no review can be made against your judgments. That is the position of the law. And the only circumstances under which the Supreme Court may alter slightly its judgment is clearly provided for in Order 8 Rule 16 of the Supreme Court rule. That is, if there are what typographical errors, or if the intendment of the court is not explicitly clear, the Supreme Court can rewrite its judgment or rewrite that part to explicitly state and clearly state the intentions of the Supreme Court. Any other application contrary to these positions of the law amounts to what? A clear-cut abuse of the court process. And so, due to the desperations to gain political powers and all of that, and lawyers being what they are, officers in the Temple of Justice, when they are approached with a brief, they have the right to what? Accept the brief. But taking it to this level, whereby you are asking the Supreme Court to review its decision, it's highly vexatious and what, of course, an abuse of court process. And if the Supreme Court had failed to stall that development, it would have led to what? A floodgate of litigation. All forms of aggrieved parties will go back to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court for whatever reasons, whatever grounds, that they should what? Review their decision, and then it will now what? Make the Supreme Court look what? Negate the supremacy and the inviolability of the Supreme Court. So anything that tends to dent the decency, the reputation of the Supreme Court must be resisted by the courts itself and of course by all well-meaning Nigerians for that matter. So this is a good example, this is a good precedent, so that in future cases, incidents like this, no matter the desperation to hold on to power, once the Supreme Court gives a judgment, it should be taken as final and conclusive, and on no grounds whatsoever should the Supreme Court be called to what? Recall its judgment. And then it is normal, it's not a new development when courts award costs and even award the costs against lawyers. When lawyers that ought to know the law, that ought to be custodians of the law, because as lawyers, part of your duty is to what? Educate your clients. That ought to educate their clients and say, this matter is vexatious, you do not have a good ground in law to bring up this matter, you still go ahead for reasons best known to you to prosecute the matter. The Supreme Court, the courts generally over time, they have the right to issue such lawyers to what? Pay cost to the other parties.
Thank you. Promoter, what's your take on this, what transpired yesterday as regards the Supreme Court judgment?
Well, for me, you see, the Supreme Court is final. The Supreme Court's judgment is final. Okay. Not because they are infallible. Yeah. They are infallible because their judgment is final. Okay. So until these players in this judiciary, this arm of government understand that no matter how lucrative a particular case might be, their own integrity stands to be battered if they keep on with a particular case. And that is what the Supreme Court did yesterday. What was actually very, very interesting to me was actually the fine, because the two respected lawyers, SANs in the country, after Babalola and Olanipekun, SANs, one of the most distinguished and respected lawyers in the country, were asked to pay 30 million naira each. That's both of them, amounting to 60 million naira. Not even the party, not even the APC was asked to pay these fines. The lawyers themselves, because
no, from what we read, maybe Barrister Dogo will clear the air. 10 million each. Yeah. So the APC is to pay 10 million too. The APC to pay 10 million. The lawyers, for each of the defendants, 10 million. No. Okay. So Barrister, let the Barrister clear the air on that. What was the true situation?
As a way of deterrence, and to forestall a reoccurrence of incidents like this, the Supreme Court actually asked the lawyers, the very senior lawyers, because if you could, the judge, her lordship was emotional. She cried when she was giving her judgment. It was vexatious and painful that very senior, reputable lawyers.
So who's to pay the money?
So it was the lawyers themselves. They were to pay what to the governor of PDP, the deputy, and of course the party. So it's the lawyers themselves,
not APC,
that to bear the brunt for bringing such vexatious matters to the Supreme Court.
Okay. And it amounted to 30 million, not 60 million.
30 million.
30 million. Okay. So go on, Professor, because we needed to make that clear.
Okay. So what it means is that lawyers need to be careful when next they are, because instead of making gains, they will now be making losses. So invariably, for me as a member of the party of the All Progressive Congress, I am saddened by the judgment. But then knowing the negligence that brought about the case in the first place, a man bearing 5 different names right from when he was in primary school, and you still allow that same person to be cleared even for an office as
Deputy Governor.
Yes, as big as that. So it means that there was negligence in the parts of the party, and that is what should be corrected, because this year 2020 we are going to have 2 elections in the country. We're going to be having a 2 state election in September, and then Undo in October. So what it means is that is either these people that are negligent are made to recuse themselves of that office, and allow those, because you see, being the national chairman is not just about the braggadocio or being a talkative. That is not what the office is all about. He's being competent, efficient in what he or she is doing. So basically, when we had Chief John Oyegun as the national chairman,
no, we don't want you to make it
never
personal. No, don't make it personal.
Yes,
just comment on the Supreme Court judgment.
In the former administrations, yes, I'm going there. In the former administrations, we never, the APC, because I'm saddened. The same way the judge was saddened. Yes, I'm saddened as a party member. Okay. Because we've lost Zafara, we've lost Rivers, we've lost Bayelsa as well. So it is something that we need to take our minds back and understand why are we where we are today. Because former administrations, we never lost any state. Instead, we won the biggest prize, which is the presidential election in 2015. And it was this former national that did that. So you see, being at the ends of our affairs is not just about you being, let's say, gifted with the gab, okay, with the gift of the gab, or you being ability to expose this braggadocio as its way. It is about intellect. So we need, the APC needs to be overhauled in that aspect. We need to, because such cases where someone is having 5 different certificates with different names, cannot, a person in necessary cannot even allow that to scale through without having a dissent, without a dissension. So for that to have scaled through in a place as high as that, it showed that there was gross negligence, and people need to be made to pay for that, because you know, like my colleague as well here also stated, election is costly. So imagine how much the party has lost in these 3 different states where we've been made to lose out completely. Okay,
you are looking at this loss as avoidable loss?
Very, very avoidable.
Is that the point you're trying to make?
Yes. But then talking about the judgment, like I said, it is actually, and as the learned colleague also said, it is very, very laudable. You see, that of the IMO is also coming very soon, and we were here in this program when
the issue of Bayelsa came.
When the issue of Bayelsa came, when the
announcement was made.
When the announcement was made for
okay, well, I have to thank you. So I'll allow Mr. Idefenayi, Mr. Pathfinder to also make his comment.
Well, on the issue of Bayelsa, I think the integrity of the Supreme Court would have been thrown to the gutters if they have done otherwise, like they did yesterday. Because we all know that the Supreme Court is the last hope of the common man. Like the barrister said, after the Supreme Court, the next place you cry to is cry to God. So they did the best, the right thing as at yesterday. Okay. And then the fine, I think the fine was quite appropriate, because next time somebody approaches you for a review of Supreme Court judgment, you have to think twice. You have to think twice, because they said that money has to be paid from their personal pocket. Okay. Although even if the party will pay, because they instigated the party to do what they did. And it was a deserved punishment. And then we are hoping to see what will happen in Imo. because I think the fine might even be more
Except
than
the withdrawn case already.
the fine will even be more
Yes.
than the Bayelsa own.
Okay.
So next time, because if you allow this system to continue, the integrity, like I said, of the Supreme Court will be thrown to the gutters. So I think the judgment was a beautiful one.
Thank you
and
very
I think
much.
they should sustain such judgments.
I think it's only in 2020 we've seen protests against Supreme Court judgment. That was really, it's an abysmal situation. So the judgment of the Supreme Court, according to my guest on the issue of the Bayelsa governorship judgment review, has restored the supremacy or the integrity of the Supreme Court. It appears some persons were actually expecting some kind of reversal of that judgment. Probably that would have been a very serious scenario. But I must thank my guests. Mr. Eddie Efenayeke Pafanda, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very wonderful contribution to the program today. We have to thank the SA to Edo State Governor, Ikpamosa Osamede. I think he's a role model now to our youths. Thank you very much.
It's always a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you very much.
I will have to thank the legal luminary in our midst. And of course, I always look at that as the representative of the women folk. Thank you very much
Thank you
for
so
your
much
contribution
for having
on
me.
the program.
Thank you.
And our viewer out there, thanks for being a part of today's program. My name is Ego Sagmola. If you enjoyed today's program, keep a date with me. By God's grace, next week we'll be here again to look at other national issues. Until then, do have a wonderful weekend ahead. Bye-bye.